data display options. So this is where everything that's optional is not necessarily included with it. Load checker, data reprocessor, position displays, trend monitoring, and prediction monitoring. There's a similar set of optional information that you can get from the help file for AeroPro itself. So if I go either the question in the top right or help contents research here, there's a long list of stuff in here at the bottom that's AeroPro options. Most of this is probably not going to be applicable still if it's only data acquisition. So asynchronous profiles, not really going to mean anything. Automatic time alignment, I don't think that would be applicable, but that could be applicable if it's, I think that's for multiple different data acquisition, say vendors, to get things pulled in and synchronized appropriately. Calculations in the loop, you're not really doing a ton of real-time calculations necessarily. I don't think that will be too applicable. Cross-coupling compensation, you're not doing control with this, that won't be applied. Custom compensation, probably not. DDI and external connections, maybe. This is, I think it's data display interface, and then external connections is ways to pull, I believe, other sources of information into AeroPro in order to record. Kind of using this as a server of information to feed into. EtherCAT, also probably not going to use it. I think EtherCAT's fairly new to AeroPro, but if you had EtherCAT devices, you may be able to pull information from them. I don't think control is part of that yet. Handset control mode, you don't have a handset, don't have control. Mode switching, not doing control. Peak value recorder. It's interesting that that's in the options tab, but it could be something. Phase control, not doing control. Pinning, not doing control. Profile analyzer, still applicable for control. Replicated signals, I think that only matters if you're running across flex test boxes. Scan editor option, I'm not sure what that is. Shared memory would require a flex test. Signal-based command is again commanding from this, and then variable tracking I'm not quite familiar with. But so a little bit, I would say maybe DDI might be of interest. Digital data interface, connections to external data sources, so pulling in stuff from alternative locations. Things to think about if we end up finding the needs for that type of stuff. So, very quick rundown. So we had a data display. We're running data acquisition. I haven't stopped data acquisition, so we're going to get a whole bunch of noisy strand signals. So I can stop data acquisition, and once I'm done, it will say data acquisition disabled. After we're done with data acquisition, we're not done yet. We need to flush the information from the recorders. So if we double click on the recorders, there's 3 sets of boxes along these items here. What happens is, I think MTS likes to make things really granular, and in some cases I think it's overly granular. And in this case, you need to physically tell it to take whatever is in memory and save it to disk, and then retrieve it from disk and put it where you want it, is kind of what happens here. So you need to go through and first save and then retrieve. If you do a retrieve before save, you may miss a certain amount that's still sitting in the buffer, and then you may never be able to get that information back. If you do, and I don't know why if you do a retrieve that it doesn't automatically go back and prompt you to save, but it doesn't. So you'll want to do save first, and then a retrieve, and then retrieve is giving you some options about where and how you want to store the information. So stored data, you can do separate data files with the default file naming. One large file or set menus, apparently. So depending on how big, it tells you an approximate 439 megabytes. If you have gigs and gigs and gigs of data, you may want to use, say, one of the faster methods, store data in separate files with default file naming. If you use separate files, and I'm not quite sure the set names piece of it.
Maybe they'll break them down into smaller sizes.
Yeah, I think that's probably accurate. I don't know why set names.
Oh, and separate files. Yeah, that's too much.
They're both separate files. One is default file name, one is specified file. So, but this is where I'd say select the data file that we created. Where are we here? I want to go to.
450 megabytes. What was
Well,
the rate at?
Oh, it was 6144.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And why do I not have? Oh, right. So we have network, MTS data, test directory, and then I dump it into the data file that we've made. Set it here. We'll set it as a recorder. We'll do whatever option it has here set right now. Specify file and set names. There's an option on the bottom. Leave copies of original data files on the server. Allows you to retrieve your data more than one time. So you could retrieve it at different points in time if you wanted to. You could retrieve it with different ways here. It's safer to do that. It's probably going to eat up more memory.
Right.
So I'll say OK. And then you saw the quick progress bar that ran by, green blob, and then it's done. Now, since I left that information on there, you would be adding to it later. So if you go back and retrieve, if I started this back up again, I'm adding more information to what's already there. So if you go and you want to start another test, or start this test again, you would need to or want to come in here and reset to be able to clear everything out from your recorders before starting your next test.
You mean it's appending to it? Okay.
Yep. And part of the thing with this also will be we're never going to delete data without making you say you want to delete it. We're not going to overwrite data without at least having a pop-up that says, hey, if you do this, you're probably going to lose this information. Are you sure you want to do that? So now we have data to a file. To be able to actually look at the file or pull information from the file, we need to use the data display. So I'm going to do a new data display workspace. I'm going to ignore this one for now because we're just trying the predictions. So I have this list of options here. We're going to look at a PostGres data file that we just saved out. So connecting to the runtime server is what's currently happening versus looking at previous data. So we'll open it up, look at previous data, and it's pointing to my checkout test, not a training test. So here's the training test. Here's the information that we pulled out from it. So it's files, I guess, 1, 2, and 7, depending on continuous recorder, end level, peak valley, scan index, shutdown, and temporary. So 1 and 2 are the ones that we're primarily interested in, being the continuous recorders. We didn't trigger any specific end levels. We didn't punch any buttons up here to do like a scan index, like a burst mode or time mode, or any of those. You can also see the file size. So typically everything's more geared towards the one that we're taking data for. So now we're opening, and I can make a plot display. I can add in the signals that we had, so this all looks very similar to the other data display. Now the trick with this is, it's kind of like you're operating a VCR, which is weird. I have my plot set up, I think the way I want it to be. I have to play the samples through. So I have the data file open, but I need to, starting with sample 0, play it through in its entirety. So if I hit the play button, it'll tell me play the entire data set in forward or reverse direction. I don't know why reverse direction is an option. And then play back to a selected sample within the current data set. Obviously, you've got a lot of samples. Optional, introduce a time delay between each playback sample. That can be beneficial in very weird instances. Some of the like max min information that you might get out from like a meter in here, it actually has to say render the sample. If you go through it too quickly, it may miss a peak or a valley. So I'm going to do playback in its entirety, and since my size of my buffer in the scope is I think only 512, it's playing as fast as it can in real time through the 10,000 some samples, and you can see the sample number up here. So I should have set that as a little bit larger of a buffer, and then you can see more of the information on here.
So we're not able to just see it all at once.
Well, you can. I just need to set the buffer on this to be large enough to capture all that information. Because it's only going to give me probably the last 512 when it's finished. And that's looking for the rest of the data set. Because it knows it's split up in the next file.
Oh, maybe because we didn't finish on Aeropro, or you said if we start another test, it's just gonna append.
It should append, but this should have been, well, I chose the option for export to say put it into multiple files. And so that should be I thought would be the number 1 and number 2 files for the continuous data, but it's not quite happy with me on that. So I'm not 100% sure. Let's do this for now. So we might have to experiment with that a little bit. But yeah, this one's only set up to be 512, so I have to set this to be a lot higher in order to see all the information that's there. You can also downsample this, but you have to downsample it manually. So only update this display when the following expression is true. So you could do like a mod based on the sample number. Every 5th sample, only display that, and then it can roll through this and downsample on the display. So my reason for kind of going through part of this, so we can get into this a little bit more probably after lunch, I would say, but the displays piece of it, to be able to get data out to a file, there's a display type that is export. You do the same information, you do the same kind of thing to set up the exporter as if you would be viewing it, but you're sending it out to a file instead. You still have to play it back from a certain file onward, or a certain sample number onward in order to have it played out to a file. So it's the same as if you're viewing it, it's just to a file. So that's up in the upper right is export displays. So I add an export display. Same thing, I'm adding in signals. I can do multi-select. Say OK, then export. So on the export tab, I've got the options XML, tab delimited list, tab delimited table, comma separated value, and then MTS. There's a few different options in there. Do you guys use RPC at all for anything? Okay.
CSV,
CSV is the typical.
100%. I don't think anybody's ever using those.
Or maybe if you start like working with really big files, do MATLAB.
Yeah, but from there you.
Format is that?
Whatever. I used MATLAB one time, and I was just working with text files.
I usually pull in text files into MATLAB. There isn't like an automatic. This doesn't support an output into, say, a binary MATLAB file, because there's like .m files or the script files, but I think you can get. They have some format to be able to import into, but not directly from this. So you have to go CSV into CSV.
Can you convert? Can you bring in a file and convert it into another one on this platform?
Like open up a CSV.
Say I have a CSV and I want to bring it in here and I want
Pull it
to
in,
save
look
it
at it.
and convert it into another file. Put that on your list.
I will put that on the list. I don't know.
Can you run through how to save this again?
Yeah.
If you're done with this portion?
Yeah. Just from all the way from back in
Yeah.
AeroPro. So let's just close this.
Because you have to
close
get
this,
out
close
of
this.
AeroPro and into
Yep.
this application
Correct.
to save it, right?
Correct. Yep.
I-
So
I
you're done with
missed
your
this-
test.
I missed a step from,
No problem. So
from
you,
choosing the method inside.
yeah. So we've stopped our acquisition. We let that finish. We go to our recorders. Double click on recorders. Yeah. And I think you might even be able to still, yeah, you could pin this to, so you could have DAC channels and recorders pinned up top if you want. Otherwise, it's the same thing as going here or here and double clicking.
Okay.
It's just those will be the frequent use items for what you're interested in. It just depends on if you want them as floating boxes or full screen. So you're here and you're in recorders, then you save first, then retrieve. Save flushes it to ideally the disk, I believe, from memory if there's anything left in a buffer, and then retrieve pulls it to the particular location you want. So I'm going to retrieve because I already saved. So I hit retrieve, then we've got these. I'm still a little leery on why I got two files and couldn't find the other one, but default file versus specified file. I'm thinking specified file is where I'm saving to is most likely in. I'd recommend that if you're running a test, you save it to your homemade data file within the test directory, so that being the C MTS data test directory